and Susie's Kitchen. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to be making homemade ravioli. So let's get started. We'll go over the ingredients really quick. Here I have 6 cups of all-purpose flour. I have 9 large eggs. I have 1/8 of a cup of canola oil, and I have some kosher salt. So I'm going to do this just like my mother and my grandmother did. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a little well in the center. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of salt. Just going to mix that in, give it a little toss. And then I'm going to start adding my wet ingredients into this little center well. And I'm going to bring everything in and I'm going to make a nice dough with this. And so really, I used to always be amazed how they would be able to do this without, popping a hole in the side. And I learned as I started doing it myself that it's really not that difficult. You're really just using your hand. You're pulling the ingredients in from the side and you're just incorporating them a little bit at a time and then going back and grabbing more. So that's it. There's really no mystery to this. I'm going to go ahead now and just start drizzling in some of the oil. And the same thing, bring those sides in. And when it gets to a point where it's just a manageable mass of dough, then I'm going to go ahead and start kneading it. But in the meantime, I'm going to put the rest of these eggs in. And just keep bringing the sides in until all of those ingredients are mixed really, really well. And at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and incorporate both my hands and just start bringing it in really good like that. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep bringing flour in from the inside. I'm going to keep incorporating it into the inside, and I'm going to get it into one nice ball, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what we do next. Okay, so we've got all of the wet ingredients and we brought them down, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start mixing a dough. See, it's starting to come together. I have my bench scraper. Whenever I'm working on a countertop like this, whether it be with a dough recipe or anything else, I love to use my bench scraper. It keeps everything nice and neat. It's a great kitchen tool. It's one of those little kitchen gadgets I talk about that has a lot of good purpose that only it can do. So I definitely love my bench scraper. You could, if you wanted to, you could do this inside, your mixer. There's a dough attachment or a dough hook, and you could definitely do this. Again, just not something that we were brought up doing, making dough in a mixer, especially pizza dough and pasta dough. But I will admit that there are times where I take my pasta dough and my pizza dough and I will do it in my mixer, but I really, really like using my hands. At this point, the dough feels really good, so I'm going to remove this excess flour. That's something about flour. When you're making any ingredient that calls for flour, whether it be in dough or in crust, I'm not saying in cookies or in cakes, but when it comes to dough and crusts, it's not always the exact amount of flour as it was the time before. There are a lot of different things that affect the amount of flour you will need. Moisture in the air is one of them. In the United States, we measure flour by volume in a cup. And, the cup I measure today may not be the same exact cup I measure tomorrow or next week. And I guess that's why in Europe they use weight, because 32 grams is always 32 grams. So I think they're onto something there. But in the United States, we tend to use volume measurement, and it's not always an exact science. So this flour, to me, was not necessary to finish this recipe. And if I go ahead and feel later on that the dough is getting a little too sticky, then I certainly can go back and add it. Okay, so see what's happening now as I'm kneading. The dough's starting to get a little bit smoother. I can feel it change, the texture underneath my hands start to change. And really what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to just make it have a nice shiny finish. I don't want to, you know, mix it way too much, but I want to mix it enough so that it's nice and tender. Okay, so this is looking good. Maybe 1 or 2 more turns. It's good for your arms. And if you're short like me, something else that's helpful, if you have a little stool in the kitchen, you can definitely stand up like on that little stool, and what happens is it changes the angle in which you get it, and you actually can put more of your weight, your upper body weight, behind the dough. So if you have a stool, sometimes I stand on my tippy toes, that works too. Okay, we're in good shape here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually wrap this in plastic. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator, and I'm going to let it rest for at least 20 minutes. And luckily, we have the filling to mix, so that'll give us time to clean up and mix the filling, and then we'll come back. Now, okay, so we're ready to mix our ingredients. Our dough is in the refrigerator resting, wrapped tightly in some plastic. So in our mixing bowl, we're going ahead and add 12 ounces of shredded mozzarella. This I shredded myself last night off of a big block. You could do the same, or you can buy it already shred, whatever works for you. I also usually like to use fresh parsley, but it's not the season for it. It's the winter, so there's none in my garden, unfortunately. So I'm going to use just a little bit less than 1/4 cup of dried parsley. I'm going to use 1/2 cup of Parmesan Reggiano cheese. I'm going to put a pinch of salt in here. And I'm saying a pinch of salt because I'm going to taste it, and I'm going to resalt it after I taste it. But the cheese itself has a lot of salt, and you don't want there to be a lot of salt in there. Okay, now I have a 3-pound container of ricotta, and I like the dry ricotta. There's some that are a little bit more wet than others. This brand that I use happens to be very dry, and I like the dry one because it doesn't add too much water or moisture to the finished result. Okay? All right, good. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix this all up. I don't even know why I'm playing with that, because as we know, there's no better mixing tool or utensil than your hands. Now, some people put eggs in this, and they make this mixture the same way they would their big ziti or their lasagna or their stuffed shell mixture. This is different than that mixture, and I'm going to tell you why. You put eggs in this. Eggs are a leavening agent, and when you go ahead and cook your ravioli, they're going to burst because the eggs are going to start to expand, and they're going to, you know, need a place to go. And unfortunately, that little pocket that you make in the ravioli is not going to be big enough. So it's going to burst your ravioli, and it's going to cause it to leach out into the water, and then you have naked pasta with your filling all gone. So we don't put any eggs into this mixture. And also, unlike our mixture for lasagna or stuffed shells or baked ziti, there's no garlic in this. We just rely on the flavor from the 3 cheeses to go ahead and flavor this. And trust me when I tell you, the flavor is wonderful. I'm just going to grab a spoon, and I just want to taste it. I think it's perfect. I don't think it needs any more salt. Really, that's what I was just checking for. I think it's seasoned very nicely. So I'm going to put this in the refrigerator. We're going to go ahead and clean up, and then I'm going to get out my little pasta machine, and we're going to go ahead and roll out the dough. Okay, so our dough is done resting. We got a little pasta machine out, and we're going to go ahead and start rolling this dough. We're going to start on the widest setting, which is number 1. I'm just going to go ahead and make this a little bit thin, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a little bit of flour on both sides of the dough so that it doesn't stick. And you can also put some inside your machine so that as you're turning, it doesn't stick. All right? So this is the first pass. Sometimes you got to kind of feed that first piece in there. And this is a great thing to do with 2 people in the kitchen. Good on the buddy system, because one person can hold the machine for you, and the other person, my husband hears me. Okay, good. And then the other person can do the cranking. Perfect. So look how nice that is, okay? That's just the first pass. Again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a little more flour out. And now I'm going to actually turn this, and I'm going to bring it to number 2, which is not much thinner than what we just did, but it's thin enough so that it's going to go ahead and make it just a little bit thinner than before. We're not looking to take it, you know, from 1 up to a 7 or an 8 all in the first shot. We do this gradually because that's what the dough responds to better than anything. See how nice that gets? All right, so now we're going to go from 2. We're going to go to, we're actually going to go to 5 from 2. And you're going to see that each time I pass it through, it's going to get a little longer. It's going to get a little thinner until we have reached the consistency. Whoops, sometimes it's a little temperamental. But until we've reached the thickness that we want. Oh, that looks good. That looks really good. Okay, so just want to make sure as this is coming out, we move it out of the way. See how nice and thin it's getting? And it'll get to the point where as I have it lifted, you can just about see through it. And that's really what we're looking for. This, for me, is really good right now. I'm not going to make this any thinner because I don't want it to tear. I'm going to go ahead and make a couple more sheets. I'll make these sheets that I already cut out nice and uniform so that when we go ahead and start putting the filling in and cutting them, they all come out the same size, okay? Be back in a second. Okay, so we're ready to fill them. I have 2 pasta sheets rolled out here. They're pretty much the same thickness and the same size. And I use my trusty little scoop. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to place 1 scoop in between. Now there's a lot of different ways you can stuff the ravioli. They actually make a ravioli form. When I was a little girl, my grandmother had a ravioli form. It looked like an ice cube tray, and it had you know, not very shallow depressions in it, and you would lay your pasta dough over that. Then in the depression, you would go ahead and you would put the filling, and then you'd put another sheet, and then my grandmother would take a rolling pin and she'd go over the top, and they would break apart. So I actually have one of those, but I'm gonna do these different. This used to be my mom's. This was my mom's ravioli maker, and I like using that, probably just because it was my mom's, but that's what we're gonna use. So all I'm gonna do is just go down here with a little bit of egg wash, and that's nothing more than a beaten egg and a little bit of water or milk. I use water because it sits on my counter for a little bit, and so I like to use water instead. Okay, and then I'm going to take this other sheet. I'm going to go right up over top. And I'm going to just use my hands to get some of that air out of there. And then once I go ahead and I get the air out, then I'm going to go back with the ravioli press, and I'm going to cut them out. So, a little bit of pressure, and there you go. What I like about this ravioli press is because of the way that it's designed on the bottom, is as I am cutting them out, it also seals them. So I don't have to go back with a fork later on, which if you've ever done them by hand with your pizza cutter, you know that you have to go back later on with your fork and seal the edges so that the filling doesn't fall out when you're cooking them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make a lot of these. This recipe that I did, I actually did 3 times the recipe today. That makes about 75 raviolis. My brother's coming for dinner, and there definitely will not be any leftovers. So we're going to go ahead and make all of these raviolis, and we'll stop by and show you how they look when they're cooked. Okay, so I want to show you how to do these with nothing more than your pizza cutter, because maybe you don't have, you know, a ravioli press and you don't want to go out and buy one. You don't have to go out and buy anything. You can do these without fancy gadgets and toys. So I just want to show you how easy it is. If you just have a pizza cutter, or even if you don't have a pizza cutter, you can use a knife. If you have a bench scraper, you can use that also. It worked very well. Okay, so I laid this out and I filled, you see how I filled it off to one side? I'm just going to go ahead and give it a little egg wash now along the edge. Great. I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it over. Okay. Just bring it down. There you go. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get the air out of them. Removing the air for 2 reasons. One, they look nicer when they don't have the air in them. But the other reason is the air will be a place for steam to build up. And that could be another reason why your raviolis break open. So you definitely want to go ahead and get all of that extra air out of them because you don't want them to break open when they're cooking. So go ahead and just go around them with your hands, push down on them. The dough's not that delicate. You're not going to break it. So I have my pizza cutter. I'm just going to go up along the seam, give them a cut, get rid of all of this excess dough, get rid of that, and then just go ahead and separate them. The only thing now that I would do that I didn't do before is I'm going to just go ahead and grab a fork, and I'm just going to make sure that they're sealed. And you only have 3 sides to seal. So there you go. So that's your alternative if you don't have something like this to press them with. Like I said, I only have that because my mom passed it down to me, but you don't need something like that. You can definitely do these without the need for that. So our water's almost boiling. What I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of these in. I'm going to show you how to know when they're done being cooked. And then I'm going to taste one and let you know how good they are, so you can go ahead and try these yourself at home. They're a lot of fun. My kids love to help make these. In fact, when I'm done with these few, I still have another 50 or so to make, and everyone's going to jump in and give a hand. That one's got a little too much pasta, so you just give it a trim. That's all. They're not supposed to be perfect, you know. They're homemade. They're made in your house. They're not made in an assembly line in a factory with perfect presses. They're not going to come out perfect every time. To me, a big part of what makes homemade food so special is how it appears to be made in your home, made with your hands, made with love. So give me a minute. Okay, so our water's boiling. And I'm going to turn this down because you see how rapidly that's boiling? That will also cause your ravioli to break open. So we want the water hot. We want it to be just out of boil, but we don't want it to have a rolling boil. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put these in. Now the temperature is going to drop because we're putting something cold into really hot water. So don't be afraid to go ahead and turn it up a little bit. And you're going to see now they're going to start to float. Now remember, this is fresh pasta. Fresh pasta does not take as long to cook as dried or frozen pasta does. So you're going to see that within, 3 minutes, these are done. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to just keep an eye on them. We're going to make sure that they're moving around, that they're not sticking to each other. Usually when they come up to the top and float like that, that's your indication that they are cooked. So I'm just going to give them from the point they hit the top of the water, I'm going to give them another minute because I want to make sure that the ragout inside and the mozzarella is cooked and, and nice and hot when I take these out. But you see that they are floating already, which means that the pasta dough itself is already cooked. Okay? Okay, so these are done. And I'm just going to pull them out with a slotted spoon. You don't have to do a red sauce if you don't want to. Although red sauce is delicious and it's the most traditional way to eat them, you could definitely saute a little bit of garlic in a little bit of oil. And you can give these a toss in that with a little bit of Parmesan cheese. They would be absolutely delicious like that. Or, like I said, you can go ahead and do the red sauce. Side up. Make sure you strain all the water out of them because you don't want them to be wet. Okay. I'm going to just put a little bit of sauce on the top of these. This is a pot of sauce that we started last night. We finished this morning. Meatballs are in there. Go ahead and check out my meatball recipe. All right, we're going to try one of these. And even though there's already cheese inside them, you can't have these without a little bit of Parmesan on top because that just... Okay, so try this. Oh my goodness. Absolutely perfect. Here's something just I want to show you real quick too. If you make a lot of these in advance, you can dust them with a little semolina, put them in the freezer for about 10 minutes until they get hard, and then just take them right out and put them in a zip baggie, seal it tight, and store them. And you can keep them in your freezer for up to a month if you wanted to. And then just cook them as you need them. And that's it. Okay, make sure you come back and visit us again because there's always something good cooking in Aunt Susie's kitchen.